Hello, everyone. I'm back at you like promised with part two. Just to go back a little bit where I ended off. I think I was telling you guys about when I had a dream of my grandfather after he passed, telling me he was going to take me back with him. At this time, I had a baby. She was about maybe 4 or 5 months old. And this was from my high school sweetheart, the guy I told you about in part one. And I was still living home with my parents. And shortly after I had that dream, it kind of puzzled me because I thought about when I called my grandmother after having that dream, how did she know exactly what I was dreaming? That at that time, me not knowing, not understanding that, hey, this sound like witchcraft. This sound like something that was, planned, like something that was planted in my mind while I was asleep. Something I couldn't explain because at the time I did not know, and understand. So I kind of disregard the whole situation. And so as time went on, I ended up moving out of my mom's home. Now I have my daughter, and at this time I was working for TDC. And I can recall one day just going by my grandmother's house. One day after work, the family was over, and I just wanted to go and speak and see everyone. And I walked in, and I had two I'll say one cousin. And my grandmother adopted a baby. And at this time, he probably was about 9 or 10 years old, which ended up being my bonus uncle. When I walked in, him and my cousin was sitting down on the floor and they was talking as I was walking in. I heard him tell my little cousin that she go tell her. And she was like, no, I can't, And so he said, well, if you don't, I will. And so that's when he told me, he say, when you leave your daughter with my aunt, which is my little cousin's mom, the one that was sitting down talking to him, said that she said she walked in the room more than one time with her brother putting his hands in my baby's pamper. Immediately when I heard this, I start freaking out, and I was like, where's your mom? Is there truth to this? I asked her, I was like, wait a minute, did you tell your mom what happened? She said, yeah, I told my mom, and my mom just told me to shut up and don't say anything, that everything was gonna be all right. So my grandmother seen that I was very upset. She called me in the room and closed the door. When we got in the room, she began to tell me that, to calm down, that everything was going to be okay. And her next statement to me was, just look at it this way. She's only 2 years old. She's not going to remember. And family don't tell it on family. Don't call the cops. At this time, all I can think about is what I've been through. All I can think about all the trauma and the abuse I had to endure now is going passed down to my child. Next thing you know, I spit in my grandmother's face. Now, mind you, again, you guys, I wasn't saved. I told you guys in the beginning that how I was just very, very disrespectful and very disobedient growing up. I repented for that after I got saved, but at that moment, all I can think about was my baby, what I've been through, and that this seems like a family, just like a generational curse that has been taking place in this family, and it needs to stop. So I remember leaving very hysterical. My baby at the time was with her dad's mom. And I remember, driving to go pick my baby up. I'm crying. I called the police. I asked them what all could I do. They told me go take her to the doctor, and get her checked out. And so we went to the emergency room, and it was me, her grandmother, her aunt, and her cousin. And we got into the hospital, and I explained to them what we was there for, and I let them know what my little cousin told me. So of course, CPS was called out. They were there. And it took about six of us to hold her down. I'm crying, I'm hysterical, seeing my baby go through all the pain. They had to put a catheter in her, and if anybody ever had a catheter being put in, it hurts. So just imagine this baby going through this. And so when all the test results came back, it was told to me that she had an infection. They put her on antibiotics, but they said this infection, you know, that was caused by the dirt from fingernails, that it was just gonna leave like a permanent, like some permanent damage. I remember just crying, asking God why, why my baby, I'm not understanding, like, why is this keep happening, and why are we made to shut up and not do anything? Long story short, when the police, when it was time for the police to get back with me about the report, they tried to reach out to my aunt. She wouldn't allow her daughter to give a statement, and because she was a minor, the cops told me it was nothing they can do about it. So in my heart, all I kept thinking was, now here again, something like this happened, and I have to go on as if nothing ever happened. So you can imagine at this point, I'm full of rage, I'm full of anger, and I'm very, very overprotective at this point of my child. It's sad, but we all know that things like this happen. It's just knowing that you're free from it, you're delivered, and you can talk about it. After that, I kind of, was numb to it. I just made sure my baby got the treatments that she needed, and I just went on with life, just thinking that, hey, since the cops couldn't do anything, this is another thing that I just had to bite the bullet on. Um, Years later, I ended up pregnant with my second daughter. And I can recall, living in this house, and I was renting. And I remember my dad coming over, and he told me, he said, hey, you're a single mom. I think it's best that you move in with me and your mom. I want to see you get your own place. Save your money. You have a nice job. Save your money and go get you a house. So I moved in with my parents. I think the baby was at the time maybe 3 months old. My oldest was 5 years old. So I moved in with my parents, and I'm working, saving my money, taking care of my girls, helping my mom at this time. My mom had I have a sister that's the same age as my oldest daughter. So I was, being big sister, and raising my daughters, and just saving my money so I can go and move out and get my own place. Well, 6 months into living with my parents, my mom and my dad went to Louisiana to go visit his mom, and they took my oldest along with them. They came back on a Sunday, and I can recall being in a bed laying down, and my dad had bought food for everybody to eat. My mom was in the kitchen fixing his plate. And I was laying in the bed with playing with my 9-month old. My dad was laying in the room, and my sister, my baby sister, and my daughter was in the room with him. My daughter came in the room, and she told me, Mom, you need to go in the room and check on Papa. Something has happened. He got white stuff coming out his mouth. I jumped up, and I went in the room because my dad had a stroke before. So I just assumed that this was a second stroke. So when I walked in, I can tell that, it was happening again. I elevated his feet, pick up the phone, I dialed 911. This whole time, guys, my mom's still in the kitchen fixing his plate. She don't know what's going on. She don't know, that I had called for paramedics. She didn't know at the time. So she came in, and she realized, that something was wrong. And so I helped calm her down, and we were just waiting on the paramedics to get there. When they got there, they immediately put him on a stretcher, and they wheeled him out. But the kids and myself remember this one thing. He turned around and he waved at all of us. We did not know that was the last time we would see my dad alive in our home. He stayed in ICU for about a week. I think that Friday, because this was Sunday, so by that Friday, they told my mom there was nothing else they can do for him, and they was releasing him to hospice. Well, my mom called home, and she told us that he was going to rehab. she didn't want us to be, worried or, concerned. So she just told us that he was in rehab and they had to, try to help him use his left side again because of the stroke. So I'm in there, at the house that Friday. I was like, look, we're going to all go see him. I'm going to take the kids. We're going to go see him on Saturday. I received a phone call Friday evening from my brother telling me that my dad called him and asked him if he can come pick my mom up because this whole time she remained by his bedside. He said she needed some rest, that he wanted her to come home, um, take her a shower and get her some rest and then come back the next day. Well, my brother said he couldn't do it, so he called me to go do it. I got there and I can just recall my daddy just talking. He 100 miles per hour, asking for food and drinks that, he cannot have. And I'm looking and I'm like, let me ask the doctor. Let me make sure. Not understanding that my dad knew that he wasn't gonna make it, didn't know the severity of his condition, so I'm, 25 at the time. I'm by his bedside, just want to give my dad what he want. My mom left out the room, and when my mom left out the room, he looked at me and he looked me in my eyes and said, if you can do something for me tomorrow when you bring the kids, make sure you bring chocolate chip. Well, those of you that know, chocolate chip is my baby girl. All of us are light skinned, but when I had my second daughter, she came out a little darker. My dad was dark skinned, so he said he finally had somebody that looked like him. If I was in the Lord then, I would have known the way that he was talking and the things that he was asking for, that this was probably gonna be like his last day. But I had no clue. I recall him saying, "Okay, y'all go home, get some rest, just come back in the morning." So me and my mom, we left. We went to the house. When we got to the house, she told me, she said, "Look, you've been in the house all week. I want you to go get you some rest. Without the kids, I'll watch them. Go to your friend's house and just relax." So I did. I went stayed the night over one of my friend's house, and I can recall waking up out my sleep maybe about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, just crying, 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 saying that my dad was finna pass. Um, and my friend was like, "No, you just talked to your dad. You just left. Calm down. It was just a dream. Nothing is about to happen." And I just knew. I knew in my heart that night. It's like God, was giving me a warning, letting me know that in the morning when you get up, your dad is no longer gonna be here. So he got me to calm down. My friend got me to calm down, and I ended up going to sleep. And about 6:45 in the morning, I received a phone call from my oldest brother telling me that my dad had passed. At this time, because God had already prepared me, I didn't cry, but I think I was like in a state of shock. I just stayed stuck for a minute. I can recall calling my dad's sister. We were pretty close. And I'm just, talking to my aunt, and I told her I would like to be, at the hospital at the same time with her. So we said what time we was gonna meet up, and we did. Once I got to the place, I walked in and, just went, um, grabbed my dad. And if you can remember in part one, I said I was scared of the dead. But at this time, I just, it was a sense of peace, comfort. And when I looked at my dad, he just looked sleep. I went in and I just, was hugging and kissing him, telling him that, I loved him, and, I was in a state of shock. At the moment, tears couldn't flow. It's like, I was kind of stuck. I was kind of numb. But me and my aunt was sitting on the inside, and we heard a conversation that was going on the outside, that my grandmother, my mom's mom, was having with my mom. And the conversation was her telling her to put me out. He gone now, put her out the house, put on the streets with her and these kids. She don't need to be living with you, living off of you. And she's going on and on about how I need to get out my mom's house. And so my aunt and myself walked out, and my aunt was like, "It is not the time for all of this, and what, don't be telling her to put my niece out, And I just walked out to keep from arguing. We there at this hospice, and it just wasn't the time for it. So I remember just leaving, and I said I'll deal with it when my mom come home. So later that night, we were all at my mom's house, and my grandmother showed up, and we were in the kitchen. I was washing dishes, helping my mom out around the house, and I had already told my mom, I said, if she come over here with all this, I don't know what I did to her. I don't know why your mama, hate me so much. Like, it just seemed like she hates me. And in my mind, I felt like it was because of what her husband did to me. But as I keep telling this story, you guys will know and understand why she had this, I'm not going to say hate. I would say a dislike toward me. So I'm in the kitchen, and again she comes in there saying, "What is my plans for leaving?" And I'm like, "Nah." Again, my mouth was very smart, and the first thing I said was, I pay bills here, and if anybody need to leave, it's you." And when I seen that my mom was upset, I'm her daughter, that's her mother, she's in the middle. I choose not to, just keep it going because she just lost her husband. So I told my mom, I was like, is it okay if I leave? You watch the kids. I think I'm gonna just go pick up my friend, which was my little girl's father at the time, and we're gonna go to the movies. And she said, yes, go ahead. I'm driving down Titwell, and as I'm driving down Titwell, I'm crying. I remember telling God that, hey, you took my best friend away from me. Why? And I'm crying. This isn't fair. I'm only 25 years old. I need my dad, and I'm crying. I'm crying. When I got to my little girl's father's house, and he got in the car, I wanted to go down Lockwood because that is the funeral home that held my dad's body. So I told him, I said, instead of going down Tidwell, I want to turn down Lockwood just because I just wanted to feel some kind of closeness to him, and I wanted to pass by the funeral home. So I remember turning down Lockwood. When I pass up the funeral home, in my head, I'm steady asking why, and we ended up stopping at a corner store um, on Laura Copy. And I remember leaving that corner store. I wanted to go right to pass I never told him I wanted to pass by the funeral home. That's just what I wanted to do. So instead of turning left or going straight so I can get to 59 to get to the movies, I wanted to turn right to go by the funeral home. And my little girl father was like, it'll be, quicker if you just go straight. And I was like, no, I'm not going straight. I'm turning right, and I'm the one driving. Again, like I stated, my mouth was smart. So I'm like, I'm the one driving, and I'm turning. I turned right. And immediately when I turned right, a car out of nowhere came. They were doing, I think I was going maybe 20 to 30 miles, and they were doing like 70. This car hit me so hard. The car spin, and it flew me all the way to the right. And by the time the car, land, I opened my eyes and realized I was right in front of the funeral home. So now I'm in a state of shock. Now in my head, I'm not only saying you took my dad, now you're trying to take my life. I'm upset with God. I'm angry. I'd already been through so much in my life. Like, why are you doing this to me? I looked over, and I realized that the car was damaged so bad that my little girl's father was like kind of in my lap. So he climbed out my window to get out. By the time the paramedics and the cops, everyone got there, they thought they had to call Jaws for Life, that I was stuck. I wasn't stuck. I wasn't hurt. I was just in a state of shock because I'm looking at the funeral home and like, wow, my daddy is laying right there. At the moment, they asking me, do I have anybody I can call? Not knowing that my little girl's father had already called my brother, which lived maybe like 10 minutes away from the accident. I'm begging them not to call my mom because I'm like, she just lost her husband, and you can't tell her that she almost lost her daughter too. So not knowing then what I know now, that, things was happening to me because people were praying against me. And again, as I keep telling the story, you guys understand exactly what I'm talking about. I remember they was asking me, was I hurt? They was trying to put me in the back of the paramedics vehicle, and I was like, no, I'm okay. I don't want to ride off like that. I'ma just leave with my brother. He'll bring me home. And so I had to sign. Of course, if you don't leave with them, they make you sign a waiver. And I was like, I'll go to the doctors later. When I got home, my mama convinced me to go to the emergency room. Needless to say, I walked out of that wreck without a scratch, without a broken bone, without anything wrong with me, just my car was damaged. And at the time, I didn't understand it. I thought God hated me, but that was Him protecting me. I remember like right after that accident, I talking to my mom and I was like, I don't have a vehicle. I need to go to work. I have kids that need to go to school. What am I going to do? She said, well, your dad's car is paid for. She said, you can have it. So she gave me the keys to my dad's car. At this time, I kept experiencing like I kept feeling like my dad wasn't still in the house. So I would get up, and remember I said I used to be scared, but this feeling it was a peace. I wasn't scared, Um I wasn't terrified, and it was as if I just kept saying, Dad, if it's you, talk to me. What is it that you want? Talk to me. And I can recall my mom say she hearing me talk, like it's nobody here who she's talking to. Not knowing all along that she say she would hear me just talking. So she went and called her mom and was like, hey, because my mom, she's very scary. If anybody know my mom, I'm scared of spirits. I'm scared. She's real scary. So she was like, if anything is in this house, we need to get it out of here. And so I remember, I'm in my dad's car now. I'm going to work, and I come home from work one day, and my little girl's father came over so he can see his child. And we were sitting on the couch. And here comes my grandmother. She walks in the door. She called my mom in the room and she was like, hey, can you ask him to leave? We got your sisters on the way, and I just want to do a prayer because you told me that it's a spirit in this house, and I want to pray this spirit out of the house. And so at this time, my mom, asked, my child's father if he could, leave so the family can spend some time together. And he did. And I can recall it being, I have an aunt that's the same age as me and a cousin. We kind of grew up like sisters, but all three of us are the same age. And I can remember all three of us was there, and my mom's oldest sisters, they were there. Um, and so I remember my grandmother said, let's go in where she feels that the spirit is more strong, which is was in my mom and dad room. And so we end up going in there. And as we went into the room, I can recall her telling us to grab hands. We're in a circle. Mind you, she's in the middle of this circle. I never understood this kind of prayer, but she's in the middle of the circle, and all of us are holding hands while she leads us in prayer. At this time, I had already knew that this prayer was going to be a prayer like she prayed when my grandfather passed in that hospital. So I was already not paying any attention. I was already tuned out, and I'm holding my cousin's hand. I'm laughing, and she began to pray. And again, she started praying in Creole. And I'm like, if you're praying for me, you need to pray a prayer that I understand, because I don't know what you're saying. I'm not going to let no one pray for me or over me, and I don't even understand what they're saying. I knew that much, I had that much sense to know that something is wrong with this prayer. And as she began to pray, she started saying my daddy was in the room. And I'm laughing, I didn't understand. I wasn't in church. So I didn't understand about spirits. I just know that there were spirits, evil spirits, good spirits. At the time, I just didn't understand. I'm, 25 years old. I just knew at this point that my grandmother just wasn't praying to Jesus Christ. And so she began to pray in Creole. And as she's praying in Creole, I'm laughing. And in my head, I'm saying, I rebuke this prayer. Next thing you know, she just crying. Crying, oh, stop, leave her alone. Get out of here, get out of here. And everybody stop. We're looking. And she say, he's here. Edwin is here. And I'm like, huh? So my mom asked everyone to leave out the room. We went on in the living room. I'm laughing because I'm like, this is weird. I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew it wasn't of God, and it was just weird. She was in the room, so she began to go in every room crying, saying that, my dad was there at that time, and she going in every room saying this prayer in Creole. So me not understanding fully what's going on when she left, I was like, "Ooh, I'm glad the bad energy is gone." Shortly after that, I started having nightmares. Not only was having nightmares, every time I got in my dad's car, it felt like a heavy, dark spirit was riding with me. This time, I'm afraid. I'm terrified. And I'm like, this didn't happen until she said that prayer. And I'm like, how do I stop this? And it just, God, because I wasn't saved at the time, I didn't understand, but He let me know. He gave me a sense of peace to let me know that it wasn't Him, and that that spirit was trying to get me to leave my mom's house and get out of my dad's car. Because remember, I told you, when he died, that was the first thing she said, was to put me out. So she thought, by conjuring up this spirit or whatever it was, me feeling like it's my dad, like it would come to me like a familiar spirit to make me think my dad is saying, okay, it's time for you to go and leave my car behind. I didn't understand it. I just went through the torment, at that time it just led me into doing drugs and alcohol just uncontrollably, because I can't sleep at night because these spirits are tormenting me, and I can't sleep. So it's like, I felt like if I get high or get drunk, it'll help me at night just go to bed. And it was okay in the daytime. It was only happening to me at night. And so one night, I remember right before the funeral, I remember laying in the bed, and something came, like I don't know if I was dreaming, but years later, after I talked to my pastor, he let me know that God had sent an angel to talk to me in my sleep. But I thought I was dreaming. I didn't know what was going on, but something sat on the bed with me and began to talk to me. But the voice sounded familiar, and they called me by my nickname, which is Soki, which is the only nickname that my dad called me. So it made me feel safe and comfortable. And it just began to tell me that everything was okay. And he also let me know about different policies he had. And that he wanted me to know that he left one of the policies was for his kids only. And it's just like we were having like a normal conversation, and he told me exactly where these policies were hidden. And again, like I told you guys in the very beginning, they would come talk to me, and then things that they tell me in the dream, they were actually reality. So when I woke up, I went in a file cabinet that he told me that these policy was in, and I found all four policies. Went talked to my mom, and at this point is when I went talked to my mom about everything. I talked to her about her mom. I also talked to her about the situation that happened when my grandmother called for her to pick me up. That time, my grandfather raped me. And I asked her, did she know why she was picking me up? Did my grandmother tell her why she was picking me up? And at this time, she was like, she didn't know. She was like, I would never send you somewhere where you're being harmed. Ain't nobody tell me that. So I believed her, and I apologized to her because I let her know this is why, growing up, I was talking back, because I felt like she hated me. And I explained to her why I did what I did. And at this point is when I apologized to my mom. And, our relationship grew much better. After that, shortly after that, after my dad died, I was, like I said, I had started doing drugs and hanging out, doing things. Needless to say, those spirits didn't make me leave, nor did they make me give up my dad's car. But I'll tell you about that car because I ended up in another car wreck. Um, so shortly after that, I met someone. And when I met this guy, he was a pimp. And when I met him, I told him, I say, no, don't want to talk to you because I'm not a whore. I don't get down like that. So if that's what you thinking I'm finna do, you got me sadly mistaken. Can't no man tell me what to do. I'm going off. I'm saying this and saying that. And my mom used to always tell me, you just like your dad. You don't want to take nothing. You somebody do something to you, you want to pay them back. You're stubborn. And so I'm just telling him I'm not that type of woman. You need to go find. He was like, no, 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 no. It's something about you. And he just kept being real, persistent about being with me. He just kept. So and finally, I just finally gave in, and we began dating. Shortly after, I told my mom I was gonna move, and move in with him. And my mom was like, no, I don't want you to leave. I don't want to be in the house by myself. You here helping me with your sister and your brother. It's okay if you and your girl stay here and he can move in as well. And I'm like, in my head, I knew it was wrong. And I knew my daddy would have never went for that, but at the time, I didn't want to, my mom, she was still grieving my dad's death and she didn't want to be alone. So I took her up on that offer. And so me and him, at the time things were going good. He told me he had left that lifestyle alone. And one day my phone rang and it was a young lady and she began to tell me who she was. And she was like, hey, I'm his bottom girl. And I'm like, I thought he said he quit. So I confronted him. And when I confronted him, he told me, he said, yeah, I was thinking maybe you can get into this with me, and you can help me. We can make a lot of money, And I was like, and so the girl introduced herself and basically she was letting me know that, she would prefer, she was more comfortable with talking to me. We began talking on the phone and, I began to, like just loosen up a little bit about the situation and I would be with him when they out doing whatever they were doing. So now they calling me a madam, not knowing all along that God was going to use me to help these young ladies. So I'm out here, condoning what he's doing. I'm not saved. I don't know the Lord. I'm out here just wilding out. My dad is gone. I done been through enough. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And so, but I can recall going to these young ladies and telling them, go home, raise your kids. Why are you doing this? Behind his back. So eventually I got convicted and I say, look, no more. And if you want to keep living that lifestyle, we don't need to be together. So he said, we both had jobs. It's not like we didn't have income coming in, so he said, you know what? Let's go get our own place, and he proposed to me. And he said, we're going to live our life, just me and you. We're going to raise your two girls. And he had two kids and we was just going to live, just be happy. So we moved out and everything going good. I'm thinking he's done with that lifestyle. I'm working, he's working. And one day I went to work and for some reason, I just felt like something wasn't right. And I asked my mom, to like go by my place, to check things out. Well, my mom went by the place and she came back and she had his daughter with her. And so when she came back, she said, no, everything is good, I guess trying to not hurt my feelings or whatever. But his daughter ended up calling me and she said, Miss Tasha, she said, I just want to tell you that my dad had two women in your house. And I was like, oh, and my mom didn't tell me, Well, when I went to my mom and I asked her, I was like, why wouldn't you tell me that? She said, well, because, your dad had him another woman, while we were married and you guys knew that. And I don't get in nobody's relationship. And she said, I didn't want to hurt you, and I know how that feels. So I didn't want to hurt you. And so, I was so used to being cheated on in my first relationship. As a kid, I felt like, I'm grown now, that things would be better. So I can recall telling myself I'm gonna have to leave this man because I told my mom when I was a kid I never take what you're taking, but you got to be careful what you say because God hears you. Never say what you'll never do. And I kept saying I'll never do that. I'll never be with a man that'll cheat on me. I'll never, once I get grown, that is it. So I called myself was about to leave him. And I let my right hand know what my left hand was doing. And before I could leave him one night, I'm in the bed and I'm asleep. And it's about 3 in the morning. And I jumped up to my baby saying, "What are you about to do to my mom?" And when I jumped up and I looked, he had a crowbar in his hand. And if my baby wouldn't have woke me up, this man would have bashed my head in with that crowbar. So the first thing I did, not knowing Jesus, I thanked my baby. Thank you, because he didn't want to do it in front of her, but he could have. He could have killed us both. He just had some kind of connection with my baby girl to where he just liked her a whole lot. And I guess he didn't want to do it in front of her. But her waking me up is what stopped him. And when I realized what he was finna do, we had a talk. I was like, why did you have a crowbar in your hand? And he tried to lie, but I knew exactly what he was trying to do because I saw the rage in his eyes. We didn't have a flat tire. And when I turned around and looked, he was like pulling his hand down like the crowbar was like above his head. So I can recall calling one of my aunts and telling her what happened. And she said, "You got to get yourself out of there. You got to get out of there." And she said, "But don't let your right hand know what your left hand doing. Let me keep the babies one night, and you that night you go to bed, you get up that morning." She say, "Go to work and just don't go back home." So I call myself, thinking I'm smart, doing exactly what she told me to do. I told him, I said, "Well, my oldest baby was already at my mom's house to go to school the next day." But I told him, I said, "Well, I'm going to take the baby to my aunt's house." Well, this time he was like, "No, she's not going. She going to stay here with us tonight. It's a school night, and but she wasn't old enough for school." He was like, "We'll take her to the daycare. And I'll take her to the daycare in the morning." So I'm like, okay, I didn't want to argue with him. And I was like, okay, I have to do it the next night. So that morning when I got up to go to work, it's about 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm getting my baby together because I was going to take her myself to the daycare. So I'm getting my baby together because in my head, I'm going to take her to daycare. I'm going to go to work and I'm not coming back. And I had to leave everything behind. So I get my baby together, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, you think you slick?" He said, and he pulled the gun out. He said, "We're not doing this. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna take you to work. I'm gonna drop off to daycare, but I'm gonna drop you off in your car to make sure you come back." And I'm like, who told him what I'm about to do? I'm like, Lord, I thought I was being smart. I thought I was being careful, but he caught on to what I was trying to do. And so basically now I'm terrified because now you know what I'm trying to do. So what are you gonna do to my child? I'm crying, I'm begging, I'm pleading. Please just let me take her. I promise I'll be home, and he wasn't trying to hear it. So he drove me to work. We got to work. And by the time we got to my job, he pulled out the gun and he said, "Get out." And so I wanted to take my baby with me because I didn't know what he was gonna do with her. But at 3 years old, she was so smart. She said, "I have to use the restroom." So that was to get her to get out the car so I can take her into my job to help let her use the restroom. If he would have allowed that, I wouldn't have came back outside. Well, he said, "Pee on yourself." He was like, "Cause you think you slick. You smart, you know what you're doing." He said, you going with me." And so I had to get out the car. And I remember going inside, I worked for TDC. And at the time, I was like, man, do I tell my job? What should I say to the people on my job? I work for a correction office. I'm a correction officer. I don't know if I get in trouble for something like this. What should I do? So at this time, I didn't say anything, but I asked could I use the phone maybe about an hour later to see where my baby was, and I ended up calling the babysitter, and he ended up dropping her there. So that gave me a sense of peace, knowing that she wasn't with him all day. I didn't know what he would have done to my child, while I was away from home, and not in her presence. After that, he picked me up from work. And again, he had his gun on him and he let me know if I tried anything, if I told anybody anything, that he would kill me. And so we went pick my daughter up from daycare and we went home. Later on that night, I tried to use reverse psychology and I told him that, hey, let's spend a little alone time. Let's take the baby to my aunt's house, and we can spend some time together, and just me and you. He fell for it. I dropped my daughter off to my aunt. Me and him, we spent some time together that night. And mind you guys, I was terrified because he tried to kill me once before. So I didn't know, what he would do. So that night passed. I woke up that morning. I told him when I got off of work, we both got ready to go to work. And I told him when I got off of work that we was just gonna hang out. I would pick up the girls a little later that night, and that me and him would do some things together and just hang out. I went to work. I got off of work. Needless to say, I didn't go back home. I picked my daughter up and I went straight to my mom's house. The only thing I had on me was the uniform I had on when I went to work. The next day I had to work, so I just went to work from my mom's house. Um, Dropped the baby to daycare. Talked to my babysitter. I advised her that no one is to pick her up. Don't let him come get her. No one come get her. Only me. I went to work and I turned my phone off so I wouldn't receive phone calls from him. And I'm sitting at work and I am in a pod one day and they came and got me and they said, Officer Wilch, you have a phone call, which is not normal because you're working in a prison, you can't receive inside phone calls unless it's an emergency. So I got to the front picket, and when I got there, I got on the phone and he went on and on to say that, I needed to come home, that something was happening at our place, and that I needed to come see somebody tried to break in. I knew it was a lie, so I immediately hung the phone and went back to work. I ignored him. When I got off of work and cut my phone on, I realized that I had maybe 30 something missed calls where he had been calling my phone from 5 that morning all the way until I got off of work, back to back to back to back. He left messages after messages telling me that, something was happening at our place and that I needed to get there ASAP. I went to my mom's house that evening. He began calling my mom's house phone, and at the time, my baby brother, he was still a teenager. And I can recall him saying that, hey, let's swap phones. You give me your phone, I'll give you mine. And when he called, I'm going to, talk to him. Let me deal with him. Um, I remember, him getting the phone. He called when he realized it was my brother. He stopped calling the phone. Shortly after that, I can recall one of my cousins that we were real close at the time, asking him if he can go with me, um, to go get my stuff out my house because I knew I wasn't going back. I was like, hey, can you ride with me? I need you to bring your gun. I don't want to be in there trying to move my stuff alone. Can I get you, your brother, and maybe my little brother to help me move out? And he was like, yeah, sure, we'll do it on Saturday. And this was like maybe like a Wednesday or a Thursday. That Friday, I needed clothes. I needed like more uniforms, clothes for my kids. So I decided to just go back to the apartment, to grab a couple of items and get on out of there. I didn't go alone. I had someone with me just in case he was there or tried to come back while I was there. When I got there, everything was intact. All the furniture was still there. All the pictures on the wall, all that was still there at the time. And remember, I said this was Friday. And I was supposed to go Saturday to move out, but I got to work. And for those that know what TDC is, mandatory overtime. If your name comes up and it's overtime, you have to stay. So this particular day, they called on my name and they was like, hey, your name came up. You have to stay till 6 o'clock today. And I knew that my cousin and everybody was going to meet me at 3 so we can go and move all my stuff. So I was like, I can't stay. I didn't let them know what was going on. So they were like, if you don't stay, you're going to get disciplinary. Working for TDC is the state. And with them, if you get 3 disciplinaries, and I'm going somewhere, the reason why I'm telling you guys this, because you're going to find out when I finish this part. But working for the state, if you get 3 disciplinaries consecutive back to back, disciplinaries is automatic termination. At this point, when they told me it was that I needed to stay, I already had two disciplinaries for not staying. I'm young, very smart mouth. No one could tell me what to do. And there's been times where they came and say, hey, mandatory overtime is your time. And I refused. So I was already maybe like on a 6 month probation period. So when they came to me and told me that Saturday that it was my time to stay, I had no choice because I didn't want to lose my job. So I recall, asking him, can I go use the phone real quick to make arrangements for my baby and just to call my cousin and to let him know that I wasn't going to be able to move that day and that ask if we can do it that Sunday. Um, when I got off of work, my cousin told me that he was busy on that Sunday, so his brother was going to go with me. And I was like, okay, cool. I get off at 2 o'clock. He can meet me at the house about 2:30. About 2:30, me and my cousin, we pulled up to the apartment and we got out. He had his pistol on him and I had one on me as well. When we got out the car and before I could get to the front door, um, the neighbor he said, hey, we've been looking for you, trying to get in touch with you, you know, but when you get a second, come talk to me. And I was like, okay, trying to get in there and get whatever we can get real quick before, he come home or whatever. So I just let the neighbors know, give me a second and then I'll come talk to you, when I'm done. We tried to get in the front door. I used the key, and apparently he had the top lock locked from the inside, like the deadbolt lock. We couldn't get into the house through the front door. So my cousin was like, let's check windows, let's see. And I was like, wait, I do have a back door. Let's go check the back door. So we walked around to the back door. We realized the top lock was locked on the back door as well. So he was like, either he's in here, and he knows we're trying to get in, won't let us in. It's something going on where we cannot get these doors open. And my bedroom window was close to the back door, so I just so happened to pull on the bedroom window, and it was unlocked. And so my cousin was like, "You wait behind. I'm gonna go through the window. Let me check things out first before I'll let you in, and I'll open the door and let you in." It didn't dawn on me to look through the window to kind of like see what was going on. I just glanced a little bit, and I did see, the bed from the angle where I can see in the window. I can see the bed, so nothing looked out of place from the view that I was looking at the time. So my cousin came to the back door. When he unlocked it, he had some tears in his eyes, and I'm like, "Hey, what's wrong?" And he was like, "You don't want to come in here." And I'm like, "Why?" He was like, because it's gonna upset you when you walk in here. In my mind, only thing I can think of, oh, he probably took some of the furniture, or whatever, and my cousin was like, just brace yourself. When I walked into the house, the back door is where the kitchen was, and you have everything that the kitchen table. From the I had like pictures and stuff on the wall. Um, just pots and pans. When I walked in, the kitchen table was gone. All the pictures on the wall were gone. And I'm like, well, man, I just was in here Friday. Today is just Sunday. Like, wow. So I looked in the refrigerator. He took all of the food out of the refrigerator, all the pots and pans, spoons, fork, everything you name it. The kitchen was empty. I'm crying at this point, and I'm walking through the apartment. When I get to the living room, everything is gone. I walked into the kids' bedroom. That was the main thing. That was my main concern. I walked into my kids' bedroom. Their bunk beds was chopped up in about 50 different pieces. And in my mind, I'm like, who would do something like this? This is crazy. And it kind of looked like I was robbed and somebody, came in and just trashed the place. When I got in my bedroom, the dressers were gone. The only thing that was left behind was the bed. I looked in the closet, all my clothes was gone, all my shoes. I was a very materialistic person. So every single purse that I had was gone. Everything that I owned for myself was gone. The only thing that was left in this apartment was my kids' clothes, their toys, and the bed in my room. Thank you guys for tuning in to part 2. I am so sorry I'm running out of time, but thank you so much for the love and support you shown me. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow for part 3. Stay tuned. Love you. Bye bye.